Good morning, Indycar fans. My name's Gordon Ross. Welcome to the Indycar show this Wednesday morning, coming to you from Partick today. The subject this morning is actually to do with the Scottish Government. And I've asked a question at the beginning of this show about which government you can think of this century which steps in to help a struggling but large-scale strategic business to survive, and then after doing so then goes on to find a new buyer for that massive business, and then gives back the shares that it has bought from the business and steps back into the shadows to allow that business to move forwards. Now the answer to that, I'm sure most of us will know, is in fact the SNP government. It's the only government I know of which actually intervenes when large-scale businesses in Scotland are struggling. There's very few, if any, in fact, governments anywhere in Europe which will step in to assist their strategic businesses when things go wrong. And not only that, but to find the buyers and investors needed for that business to then go on to continue to be successful, protecting thousands of jobs and keeping that industry in good shape for the future when we do become independent and then need those industries. Now the SNP takes a lot of flack, not only from other parties and people in the UK, but also from ourselves sometimes. I'm not above the odd criticism of the SNP. But the story this week, in which Nicola Sturgeon had personally intervened in the story of Burnt Island Fabricators, which was in severe trouble, going into receivership with the possible loss of hundreds, maybe even thousands of jobs in what is a massive marine engineering concern in Scotland, a very important industry which will become vital after independence for things like the decommissioning of oil rigs and also the construction and deconstruction of marine renewables devices, so things like undersea turbines. All of these industries, this kind of work is going to be fundamental to the future of the Scottish economy. And the SNP knows that, and unlike most governments of its time, it will step in to help industries which are struggling. Contrast that with the Tory government, which, as you may remember if you're my age, back in the 1980s, instead of assisting these strategic industries, it simply sold them off to whoever wanted them at bargain basement prices, and then closed whatever was left that wasn't profitable, and just threw hundreds of thousands, millions of people onto the dole in the process because they simply didn't care about strategic manufacturing industries. But that's because the Tories didn't understand something fundamental about Scotland and the people in Scotland, which is that this is a country full of innovators and engineers. And those innovators and engineers don't just go away because the Tories want to switch the economy from a manufacturing economy to a service economy. England now, if you look at it through the current lens of the media, England now is struggling with its economy because it doesn't have enough manufacturing and exports. And then you contrast that with Scotland at the moment, which is sitting pretty just now with a £2 billion trade surplus because it maintained and rebuilt its manufacturing sector. The SNP, despite their faults in other ways, recognise the importance of these strategic businesses and support them. And they will support them through difficult times when orders are lost and it looks bleak for an industry. That is the time when a government needs to step in to protect that strategic element in its economy. It has to be kept ticking over at least. Things like steel making and aluminium manufacturing in Scotland, you'll remember, were saved by the SNP government for the future of the manufacturing industry and manufacturing base in Scotland. It's vital that they keep doing this. But the Bifab story this week was reported finally out of trouble with a new Canadian buyer. The Scottish Government helped to broker that deal, and then having saved that company, Nicola Sturgeon and her ministers then stepped back into the shadows and allowed that business to function in the normal way. So not interfering in the methods of Scottish industry, not interfering in any way in that, but stepping in where help's needed. And this is something which a Tory government ideologically would never do, because they're ideologically opposed to any interference in market economics. However, those of you who know me know that I am something of an enthusiast for the methodology of Chinese industries. But that's because the Chinese, although they have had a very authoritarian one-party communist state where nobody gets to vote very much on anything, despite that, the Chinese have embraced the idea of nurturing their core industries to the point where they can keep them ticking over all the time, even through the hard times. And they see the value in the structural value in a country maintaining its industrial capabilities even in the tough times. Unlike the Tories with their short-term view that market forces should just sweep away industries and new industries should come in to replace them, this survival of the fittest attitude. Now, survival of the fittest is okay in some respects, but in terms of strategic business, that is things like power, raw materials and commodities, food, what else? Transport, all kinds of things to do with big industry, the things that we need every single day of the week. We need power, we need gas, we need transport, we need food. All of these things are essential to human life and to the flourishing of a nation. If we don't have the raw materials for us to manufacture the goods which we rely on in terms of our exports, then the country is not ever going to stand on its own 2 feet. And so what Sturgeon has done this week with BIFAB is another one of these fundamental moves which strengthens the Scottish economy for whatever lies ahead post-Brexit. And I know, and you know, that Nicola Sturgeon is not a stupid person. She's planning ahead, and so are her ministers and advisors. They're looking to strengthen Scottish industries prior to the next independence referendum, because what we lacked last time was the confidence in ourselves, in our core industries, and the information to give to the public about how strong our manufacturing industry and industrial base now is. It's never actually been stronger since the 1980s, since Thatcher axed most of our major industries. We now have a flourishing marine renewables industry. It's beginning to grow. It's just starting out. We have BIFAB, which is one of the biggest manufacturers, and we also have Ferguson's on the west coast, another small manufacturer with big industrial goals and big ambitions to become a marine renewables company as well as a shipbuilding company. We still have, as you know, the British aerospace or BAE Systems yards at both Govan and Scotstoun building warships. I don't think that will change, because despite all the threats and posturing during the first referendum about those jobs being pulled and BAE Systems just closing their yards down out of spite, that will never happen, because the British government needs to be able to build new ships all of the time to replace the ones which are coming out of service. If they're not built here in Scotland, they would need to be built at a yard somewhere else, possibly in England or Wales, and there isn't the capacity at the moment in their system to do any of that. So the message today from Indycar is, when we're bashing the SNP and saying we wish they would do this, we wish they would do that, and we wish they would speak up more for Scotland, remember that we're in a period of waiting just now. We're spinning our wheels, we're basically treading water while we wait to see how bad the Brexit deal is going to be. And only after that deal has been revealed to the rest of the country, to Scotland, to the rest of the UK, will we be in a position to put together an alternative which we can offer to the Scottish people in the referendum and say, this is the alternative future that we offer you. This is the Brexit offer of the United Kingdom. We have to make it very clear what we're offering. And part of that deal is the strength of our manufacturing industries, including fundamental things like manufacturing metals, aluminium and steel, and being able to fabricate those metals into useful products such as oil rigs, or the dismantling of oil rigs, ships, fishing boats, tugboats, civilian ferries, all kinds of shipping which has nothing to do with weapons and nothing to do with war. And this is what the Scottish economy is building towards. And once we have that in place, and BIFAB is going to become part of the overall structure of the Scottish economy, these things are absolutely essential to a new state. So when we are fighting for our independence, we have to consider the bigger picture, the macroeconomics of Scottish industry. What are we good at? What do people buy from Scotland? What are they going to buy from us? What are we needing to develop and supply to the rest of the world that only we can do? And these are the things that the SNP government is trying to prepare the fundamentals to have those in place so that we can make those products, design and build those machines and that equipment and sell it abroad and sell our services as both designers, engineers, scientists, thinkers and innovators to other countries who need our expertise. And China, as I've mentioned before, is one huge market where China is desperate for new green technology because they recognise the risk to the planet that the pollution their industries create is causing. So if the Chinese are taking it seriously, despite their poor record on human rights, they will improve their human rights if it means becoming a more successful country in trade. They'll probably happily trade against that. So by giving up some of this control over their political situation back home, in other words, allowing dissent in China to happen without people being arrested and imprisoned, will bring China into the 21st century and make it an acceptable trading partner for Scotland and other countries in the West. But we want to be positioned well for independence, and I believe that the SNP is doing exactly that. I've watched the various strategic moves that they've made over the last few years and the kind of companies that they've assisted and the kind of infrastructure projects that they have preserved. For example, let's take Prestwick Airport for one. The Prestwick Airport always seems to just be hanging around in the background waiting to close. There's something wrong, there's not enough capacity, somehow or other Prestwick just doesn't seem to get the business. But Prestwick's going to become vital because the Scottish economy isn't going to stay this size after independence. It's going to grow quite rapidly because suddenly we will be awash with investment once we're independent, because not only is there oil money out there which will come in from our oil wells in the North Sea and in other parts of the North Atlantic, but there's vast other mineral wealth in Scotland. There's gold in Scotland, there's coal in Scotland, although we won't necessarily be burning coal. We have enormous natural resources under our feet and under the sea at the moment, and we need to have the apparatus in place to be able to utilise them so that the economy can expand quite rapidly to fill the void left by the United Kingdom, because we don't know how successful the UK might be after Brexit. It might go into a huge slump. In fact, I predict that it will go into some kind of decline after Brexit, and that will affect our trade with England and Wales and possibly Northern Ireland as well. So we need to take into account the fact that when we become independent, when we withdraw from the Union ourselves and stand on our own 2 feet, that we need to take into account the fact that the United Kingdom is going to be wounded by that. They're going to be at a low ebb, and therefore business across an open border between Scotland and England, because it still will be an open border, that may reduce as the English economy contracts and they struggle with their balance of payments, they struggle with their huge debt mountain. So to alleviate that to some extent, Scotland needs to prepare to expand in other areas, and I think this is what the SNP is now doing. So have a little confidence in Nicola Sturgeon and her team. I believe that they're putting all of the strategic pieces on the chessboard ready to play the final game, if you like, the final chess game with the UK. We need the strategic pieces in place. A lot of them were missing in the last referendum. There were things missing from our strategic armoury. One of those was a currency. Now, I know there will be a currency issued, a new currency is being planned. Pensions was another problem. We need to restructure the whole pension system in Scotland so that everybody has a much larger pension, possibly even double the size that they have now, and enough support if you are out of work or if you're unable to work for other reasons. All those welfare things need to be in place as well before the next referendum. But underpinning all of this, obviously, is the nation's ability to make foreign currency, to sell things abroad and to bring cash into the country from other countries. This is what makes a nation wealthy, and it makes us independent of both the United Kingdom and the banks, because we don't always need to borrow to do things in Scotland. We will be free of debt once we have left the UK completely, because the UK has said that we cannot be in a currency union with them. They've made that very clear. So if we take that to its natural conclusion, if they won't let us use the pound, the pound sterling, then we need to take our 10% of the Bank of England back, and our 10% of the value of sterling needs to come back here. And that means we create our own Scottish pound with that 10% of the Bank of England that belongs to Scotland, that we built, that we've put our money into over 3 centuries. But because of that, we cannot be held accountable for England's debts. So all of the debt load will then transfer to England because, well, let's face it, they made a rod for their back by saying they wouldn't enter a currency union. So that's their problem. We will enter the new millennium as a new country, or a new old country, without any debt and with all of our infrastructure ready to hit the ground running. And that is probably the most important thing we need to remember when we're being impatient. And I get the same way as you do. I get very, very impatient for the referendum to be called. But the fact of the matter is, it cannot be called until we can see how bad Brexit is going to be. We need to be able to put together an alternative future which we can present to the people of Scotland, which is fixed and set in concrete, that will not be blown off course by anything that the British state does out of spite or denies to Scotland out of spite, like they did with the currency union. So we need to fix things like the pensions, make sure that all pensioners are guaranteed to get double the pension that they're currently getting. We need to guarantee that all immigrants who are currently living in Scotland will have full leave to remain, and for their families to come over and join them if they were expecting them to come over at some point. We also need to make sure that all Europeans living in Scotland have guaranteed citizenship here and in the European Union. In other words, dual citizenship is probably the ideal way to do that. We need to bring everybody into this alternative future and guarantee it for them. And I believe we can do that now. And when people actually wake up after Brexit is announced and after the IndyRef 2 date has been announced, there will be real information on what the future holds in both scenarios. Staying with Brexit, going down with the ship, watching interest rates rise, watching prices rise, watching tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of export jobs being lost from the Scottish economy. Or we stand on our own 2 feet, we have trillions of pounds worth of investment waiting to come into Scotland, particularly from the Middle East and the Far East at the moment. That will arrive as soon as they know that we're likely to vote for independence. It's waiting in the wings, and I know it is waiting in the wings at the moment. I've heard it from more than one source. But nobody is going to be convinced to vote for independence unless they can see that the future is guaranteed and that the currency is sorted, the pensions are sorted, and that industries in Scotland are ready to go, and that jobs are guaranteed, and there is an actual plan for what Scotland's general industrial strategy will be. There needs to be a big plan announced, and that must include, I believe anyway, must include the creation of new nationalised bodies. An energy company's already been created, although it's not really doing much yet. An investment bank has been created, it's ready to go. The final piece in the jigsaw puzzle will be the central bank, which will be needed as the Scottish Treasury. And once all of that is in place and fixed, then we can present a new country to the electorate. Not one where we say, oh, we could do this if we're independent, we could do that if we're independent. We will be able to say, we are going to do this when we're independent, and we guarantee this to you, the voter, that this is what will happen. These are the things that are already in place, and that is why when you vote yes, the country will move to independence rapidly without any loss to you. Your job will be safe, your house will be safe, your pension will be bigger, and your citizenship guaranteed if you have migrated here from elsewhere. There is no reason why these guarantees cannot be made once all these strategic pieces are put in place. But as I say to you today, BIFAB is just one of those pieces. BIFAB was a guarantee to maintain the jobs of thousands of engineers and workers at Burnt Island Fabrication. They are strategically important to the rest of the nation, just as the whisky industry, the weaving industry, the food industry. All of these things are vital to our continued success and our expansion as a small country. And I believe that if we're patient for maybe another 2 or 3 months, the date for the independence referendum will be announced before you know it. And I think the predictions I'm making today will, in large part, come to pass, because it is the only way that you can persuade people to move out of the UK and into Scotland as a single entity, a single state, separate from what used to be the United Kingdom. Remember what I said the other day, that Brexit is actually the wedge which has been driven between England and Scotland. And the more they hammer on about Brexit and make demands and say, you know, we're leaving, we're taking back control, the more it pushes the two countries apart. Because Scotland relies on its exports for its success. And by removing or damaging 40% of that exporting capacity, simply because England has a problem with immigration and England has a problem trying to protect its tax haven businesses, that is not a good enough reason for Scotland to give up tens of thousands of jobs and watch its industries go back into recession. It's just not on. We have a fantastic future waiting for us. In the next 2 years, after Brexit has occurred, Scotland will be launching itself as a brand new nation, no longer tarnished with the warmongering and the greed and the expansionism and the colonial past of the United Kingdom. We can move out of the shadow of the UK and into the light as a completely different new country with a completely different outlook. One which is positive, inclusive, which welcomes people to come and work here freely. We're not going to expel families who've lived here and built businesses here, as is currently the case. Anyway, again, I'm waffling on a little bit too long as usual, but point today is that the Scottish Government is doing something which no British government would ever do, and that is it's protecting our core industries for the future. And that is something I want you to focus on today. Scotland is getting ready to be independent, and it's putting the pieces in place now, so that when you vote, everything is ready. There's not going to be any guesswork, no arm waving, no vagaries, and no chink in the armour for the British state to exploit this time. We're going to do it, we're going to do it properly. Bye for now.